Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pursuit of Relentless podcast. You have your host here, Alaina. And today I have an absolute stud, champion mindset human on this show. And I am so grateful that I have an opportunity to interview Ken Rusk. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So not to like ruffle feathers or anything, but this guy's been on USA Today. I would be very interested to learn about your Epic Times interview. That'd be really cool because I follow them religiously. Fox News, Wall Street Journal, the list goes on. So this guy's a big deal. Okay. And it's because of what he's doing in the world, how he talks about his businesses, and the fact that he's helping people go through their journey and learning how to craft a vision and create, like he has a path to a successful life course and the blue collar cash book. And there's just so many aspects that you've used to help people. And that really resonates with me big time. So I'd love it if you'd share a little bit about your course, a little bit about your book, and your story of entrepreneurship.
Well, thank you. I guess you could accuse me of being called a blue collar entrepreneur. It's one of those things where I didn't go to college. I worked right out of high school. That's a story in itself. And one of the things that it led me to was I accidentally discovered the power of vision and the power of looking forward to things. In fact, even the words looking forward, and you say, I'm looking forward to my vacation. You're literally looking out into the horizon forward about 3 months from now, or however long you put it out. And so I started to get kind of intrigued by that concept, and everything into my life, I just looked for the visionary side of it. What does it look like? What color is it? How strong is it? How powerful is it? What's the mechanism that this thing uses? I want to bring these things into my life. So I thought if I can just focus on them hard enough and draw them out and keep them in front of me, they'll start showing up. And that's kind of what happened. So I used this theory all through my teens and 20s when I started my first company. And we started with 6 people and we ended up, I think today we have 220 in just that company. We have other things that we do as well. But I think the interesting part was no one really teaches how to use that visual side of your brain. And so I became, this is funny, Alaina, because I became an involuntary life coach. Not that I didn't want to be, I loved it, but I have no training at all. I mean, I don't have a single letter after my name. I don't have a degree. I don't have anything, but I knew how to get people to see their futures. And because it worked for me, I thought, well, if I can get a whole bunch of people surrounding me that are looking forward to what comes next in their life, then they would help me drive the results of my company, which is what ended up happening. And that kind of led to people saying, hey, Ken, what you're doing works so good for a bunch of ditch diggers, which is what I am. I'm proud to be one. Why don't you start talking to people outside the 4 walls of your company? So I did, started putting some stories together of friends of mine that were wildly successful after unbelievable challenges that they faced. And there came Blue Collar Cash, and lo and behold, it gets picked up by an editor, and then it gets picked up by an agent, and it gets picked up by HarperCollins, and it became a bestseller last fall. I have no idea how any of this happened. Never intended it for happen, but it's been a hell of a ride so far.
That's amazing. Yeah, it's so funny because when you're talking about vision, literally the very first thing that I wrote down after your name was the definition that you had in your book. It says vision, the ability to think about your future with imagination and wisdom. And I'll tell you, I come from a blue collar background myself. I'm now in the financial services industry, but it's so funny how you transition throughout your life. Like my parents were always like, you should be a doctor. You're really good in school, go to school, get good grades, go to college, retire when you're 65 comfortably, right? And that was the picture that was painted for me. And then I decided to not follow that path. I actually went to pastry school and I became a Red Seal pastry chef. And I did that for 10 years until I wasn't able to do it anymore because of carpal tunnel syndrome. And they're like, Alaina, you're either going to have to get your wrist cut open or you're going to have to change careers. So I decided to change careers. But then I went to industrial sales and then I went into heavy equipment operating. And I just, yeah, so I have like a very diverse background. And then what I was doing was understanding a lot about myself through that journey of like, okay, what am I actually chasing? What is this vision? I was told to interview my future and just go through and look at what someone's life looks like down the road that they've created for themselves from that career path. And I love that you talk about not defining yourself as your business, but also just understanding what it looks like to have comfort, peace, and freedom. So maybe you can talk a little bit about why you started your podcast as well.
Well, yeah, I think the whole process for me was why are we not teaching these simple concepts? You know, everyone reveres, you know, Bill Gates and Elon Musk and, you know, these types of people, right? That started these amazing companies. Okay. One of the reasons they revere them so much is because they think, well, how did they think of all that stuff? How did they see those things? How did Stephen Jobs come up with those, or Richard Branson, or any of those people? How did they get that out of their head and onto paper? Well, they just gave themselves license to allow that side of their brain to work. I mean, you know, they talk about we only use what, 25 to 30% of our brain computing power.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I always wondered, well, what's the other 65, right? What's the rest of the brain do? You know? So for me, it was just, let's utilize that. First off, it's free. It requires no training whatsoever. You just put yourself in a quiet place. We started with crayons. We had a big poster board and some crayons, and you just draw what you want your life to look like, literally. You know, in the center, you put your perfect house you might want, a farmhouse or a house in the suburbs or a condo in the city. And then you go out from there. Do you want pets? Okay, what kind? A dog or a cat? What color? What would you name it? What would your vacations look like? Draw that out. Okay, you going to the beach, you going to the mountains, you're going into an old city. What are you going to do? And then it just keeps going from there. What's your favorite charity moment look like? If you had $100 and some time, you know, the old time, talent, and treasure thing, what would you do with it? Draw that out. Draw out your hobbies and your sports and your car. What would you drive? Why would you drive that? What color would it be? Put all that stuff out there, because what happens, Alaina, is you end up doing is you end up drawing a brochure. You remember in the old days when you went to a car dealership, they gave you an actual brochure with all these colored pictures in it. And the reason they did that is because they wanted you to own it. Even if you're sitting in your living room, they wanted you to immerse yourself in that new pickup truck or that new convertible or whatever it was. It was a way of solidifying in your mind that that's something you should have. And the same goes true for if you put a brochure for your life together and you hang it on the wall. You know, it's funny because I was talking with Jarek Robbins, who's the son of Tony Robbins, and Tony did a nice little blurb from the cover of my book. And one of the things that they said was, the more you see something, like, you know, sometimes you'll see a yellow Volkswagen and all of a sudden you see them everywhere, right?
The
The more
reticular
you see
activating
something,
system.
yeah, it's an activation system. But the more you see it, the more the electrons or those little firing mechanisms in your brain get closer and closer together to the point where they become one stream of thought. And now your brain actually thinks it owns that thing already. So what happens is it kicks your body into this almost involuntary chase, as you put it, towards getting that thing. And your decisions are different, your awareness is different, your actions are different. So then those things come into your life and you're like, wow, how did that happen? Well, it happened because of the other 60% of your brain that you're not using. It's powerful enough to attract you to those things. So I was thinking, well, why can't we all do this? Why can't everybody? You know, we're not all going to chase McMansions and yachts and 15 cars and rap star careers. I get that. But we all do have this perfect level of comfort, peace, and freedom, our own personal nirvana, that we would say, wow, if I could live like that, that would be really cool. So I'm saying draw that out and then let's go figure out a way to get there.
So the very first time that I was told to like visualize my future, it was about 8 years ago when I first started in my entrepreneurial journey. And they just said, what does this like future self look like? Let's say you won the lottery or you have like millions and millions of dollars to work with. What does that look like for you? And I was like, I don't know. I'd have a nice house. But then I was just like, I don't know what else it would look like for me. Because I've
Right.
never been able to kind of just like take off that disbelief and just go, okay, well, maybe I can create this for myself. Maybe there is a way for me to get to the point where I am what my affirmations are is happy, healthy, wealthy, and free, right? And just creating that life for myself that I actually want. So I'd show you, but it's kind of behind some stuff right now. But I have my vision boards right there on my wall beside me because I'm like, okay, this is what I'm creating. Destination happiness, it says, thinking big, being able to interview like John Maxwell. And I just have like people on my board that I'm like, these are the people that I want to talk to and grow and eat, you know, like I want to be able to create my own garden and stuff. And this year I've made a big shift in my life. I was able to move back to British Columbia. I was in Alberta for 13 years because I was a heavy equipment operator. And so I was able to transition now back to my roots and be closer to my family and like have that family aspect of my life, which I was missing for a really long time. And now I'm able to like grow my own food. So I'm like planting my garden. And it's been just such a cool journey to be like actually touching my dreams and in the process of making it happen or allowing it to happen, I should say, because it's the vision that I put out there so many years ago when I was like, okay, we got to create a top 100. Me and my husband, when we first started dating, it was like, okay, what's our top 100 list? What are we trying to create with our lives? And he's like,
Sure.
I don't know, you know, and
Yeah.
it took us 3 hours to map that out. But then you have something to work with. It's like, okay, this is what matters to us. So yeah, it was a cool
I
journey.
think the difference is, and by the way, thank you for the garden thing. I was actually helping my son-in-law plant tomatoes yesterday in the garden
Nice.
that he's building. So the beautiful thing about that is taking it to that next step. You know, when you talk about the concepts that you put on the wall, thinking big, okay, there are certain people out there that won't be able to use thinking big because it isn't defined concisely enough for them.
Mhm.
You have the ability to handle that type of a thing because you know what it means to you. That creates a picture in your mind of certain things, certain photographs, and you connect that to thinking big. I think what we need to do for some people is we need to take it to the next level. Well, what does that actually mean? Like, I want to have a garden. Okay. What does it mean? Well, I want to have 3 beds of tomatoes and 3 beds of lettuce, and I want to have 3 beds of cucumbers and 3 beds, or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
And then the path to actually going to do that. I need to go to the store and I need to buy some dirt, and then I need to buy the seeds, and then I need to buy the fertilizer, and then I need to map out my backyard. And then the actual steps to doing these things. Some people need to take it a step further. And that's where Blue Collar Cash and the course are horribly simplistic because it's getting someone to say, there are 50 stepping stones between me and that particular goal. So the first stone I'm going to step on, which is usually the hardest one, by the way, because it's the get going one. The first stone is going to be measured by this, and the second stone is going to be measured by that, so that you can see your progress. You can see you're anticipating the result, which in my mind is the only way to live, to anticipate everything coming into your life. And those are the kinds of things that make it so easy and so simple that almost anybody can pick up that entrepreneurial torch if that's what they want, because the end game is clear enough to them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's why I like to tell people to inspire through education, because when you learn something, then you can put it to action. And it's not necessarily going to college or anything like that. Like, yes, I went to a post-secondary, but I didn't become a doctor. Like I became a pastry chef, and that was just the avenue that I chose to have for myself. But
Sure.
I saw that I didn't want to be in debt coming out of school. And I saw my sister as a chiropractor come out of school with hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And I was
Mhm.
like, I couldn't imagine having that kind of burden.
Yeah.
And then my brother started a construction business, and my other sister's in real estate. And I just look at the fact that we were raised by a single mother, and she was a nurse's aide our whole life. So we watched her work super hard and create this life. And then all of us became entrepreneurs. And it's
Yeah.
really cool that that's how it turned out for us. But it's because we saw what hard work looked like, right?
Well, yeah. And I think, again, I love the word entrepreneur because it's easy for us to understand being entrepreneurs, what that means. I think if you ask somebody, here's a piece of paper and a crayon, draw entrepreneur. I mean, you couldn't, because it's a term that requires a secondary. Entrepreneur at what? I'm an entrepreneur at ditch digger. I'm an entrepreneur at baking. Or I'm an entrepreneur at real estate. That they can draw, right? I think, and I say this in Blue Collar Cash, I think there's about 9 characteristics that make up an entrepreneur. Things like persistence and resilience. You hear that all the time, but there's also faith and courage and initiative, and there's vision, and there's simplicity, and there's generosity. So if you put all those things together, I think every one of us, Alaina, has the ability to become an entrepreneur, as long as we have a reason why we're doing it. And that's the key to everything. You can't have this if then life. Okay. If I go to school, if I get good grades, if I get a scholarship, if I go to college, if I get a degree, and if that degree gets me a job, and if that job pays me well, then I can figure out what I want my life to look like. I think that's the absolute backwards way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know what your then is right now. I want to know what that looks like, because once you have your then, which is really your life map, what your brochure for who you want to be and how you want to be that person. Once you have that in front of you, there's a million ways to get there. And the key to this is the sometimes controversial part. I don't necessarily think it's always, so important what you do for a living as it is what you do with what you do for a living. Because you have to remember that being a ditch digger was 99 out of 100 things that I wanted to do. Okay. But it led to a whole lot of control over what my future financial life could look like. And now nobody ever rolls up into my driveway and says, wow, what degree do you have? Okay. They might roll up and look at that, well, all I've accomplished and go, wow, how did you grind this life out? Which I'm happy to tell them. But just remember, every entrepreneur, every single one that I've talked to in my life ever started out with a really big reason why they wanted to be an entrepreneur. And it was usually the brochure that was their life.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love that. And that just goes to show like my own personal story of being a heavy equipment operator. It led me to be the entrepreneurial self because I wanted out of it so bad. I personally was not cut out to be a heavy equipment operator, but I met my husband there. And my husband loves it. He's like, Alaina, I'm obsessed with dirt. Like
Yeah,
he
sure. Yeah.
loves his job. But without Kyle's income, I wouldn't have been able to pursue my entrepreneurial journey because he's making like 75 bucks an hour plus overtime.
Yeah,
And then
sure.
he's like, you can have the freedom to do whatever you want with your life. Go, let's build our dream life. Let's build our exit strategy, right? And create
Love
that
it.
impact that we want to have with our lives. But without that piece, it would have never happened. Like he went to school to be a welder and then he got a job randomly given to him to be a heavy equipment operator. And now he just turned 30. He's almost 31 now. And he's like, well, we're good. Like we set ourselves up well. So now we're
Right.
able to create that dream life for ourselves. Like, okay, what does it look like for him moving back to Vancouver Island in the next 10 years? And he can go and work in the forest or go
Mhm.
build roads and do whatever he wants to do because he has that skill. Right. And I think that it's really overlooked nowadays. Like there's so much work out there, but there's not people that are chasing that version of themselves that's maybe a little bit scary. And there's
Yeah, I think there was a perfect storm that happened about 20 years ago that is only getting worse. And I look at it as this way. So when I was in high school, I could walk down the hallway, and on the left side, I could see someone changing a transmission on a Mustang. On the right side, I could see someone milling a leg on a wood lathe for a kitchen table. I could see someone doing someone's hair and nails or whatever, cooking or welding or whatever, wiring an outlet. And that's where kids accidentally discovered how cool the trades were and how much control you have, because you have ultimate control when you're in the trades, more so than a lot of the white collar jobs. So that kind of went away when they put computers in those rooms and kicked out all the machines, which I always thought, why couldn't we have had both? I mean, why do we have to have one or the other? And now you have kids that are, instead of in the backyard building tree forts, they're building cities on Minecraft on their cell phones, which you and I both know is not the same experience.
nope.
Driving a bulldozer on a computer is not like driving a D9 Caterpillar in the real world. Okay. So it's completely different. So you've got those things that are working against, the trade acceptance. And then these colleges, man, I got to tell you, for being as wholly inefficient as they are, with only 1/3 of people that have degrees ever using them in their lifetime, people changing their minds, 40% going into college, not even know why they're going. They have done a really good job of shaming parents and school teachers into, if you don't send your kid through us, he or she's going to be a loser. Okay. They've
Mhm.
done an amazing job of that. I mean, hats off to their marketing crew, but it's not true. It's a big lie. It really, really is. Now, I'm not against college. If you want to cut my shoulder open because I need help so I can get back in the golf course, yeah, I want you to know everything there is about a knife before you come at me with it. Got it. Or if you want to be a teacher, or dentist, or architect, or whatever. But if you're just going to go, there's a whole lot of better ways. And your husband is one example of that, to make an amazing living. I mean, 75 bucks an hour times, if it's just 40 hours, 3,000 a week. I mean, and that's before overtime. I'm sure a lot of kids who came out of school with $100,000 in debt and now they're working at some car rental place because they didn't even want to go to school would much rather be where your husband is than where they are right now. So hats off to both of you for taking that path.
Yeah, thank you. Well, like you said, it can be a bit of a challenge to go, okay, well, what am I going to create with my life? But if you don't try those things out and don't actually do the work and put in the time to go to shop class or that kind of stuff, how do you know what you even like to do? And then you go
Yeah.
into this career and you're like, oh, I actually really don't like it. And I met a car salesman a couple years ago and I was trying to recruit him to my business because I'm like, man, you'd be a really good financial advisor because he's literally reading like an investing book. And I'm like, I like this guy.
Yeah.
And he's like, I actually went to school to be a financial advisor. And in like 3 months, I dropped out. I was like, interesting, because it was just not for him. It just wasn't. And yet he's so intrigued by that, but he went into sales still. So I thought that was really interesting. But anyways, there's so many different career paths that you can choose. But I think that if you don't actually go and do it, how do you know if you like it or not? Right. And then people are spending all this money going to college. And yeah, I don't knock college. I went to college, but I was making 14 bucks an hour coming out of college. And that was not
Well,
sustaining my life, you know?
you
So
know,
it's rough.
you have to be really careful, because if you're not cut out for college, I mean, look at it this way. You go to a college, it's 50, let's say you go all in, every nickel you spend on college is 40, 50,000 a year. Okay. You know, that can be 200,000 after 4 years. You can be someone like yourself or your husband that went out and they started making $50,000 a year right off the bat. That's 200,000 on the plus side of your asset column. So, I mean, you know, in a 4-year swing there, I mean, there's $400,000 swing one way or the other in that scenario. So it's not only just a thought process you have to use, it's actually a huge financial decision that you make going one way or another. And again, especially since the stat continues to be the same. And I've looked this up for the book. If there's 167 million people living in the United States or working in the United States today, that's considered full-time or full employment, right? Well, 77 million of those people, almost half, still to this day do something with their hands. Okay. By the time you put your feet on the floor in the morning, getting out of bed, to the time you go to the office, school, church, whatever, you're crossing 10,000 blue collar jobs. Okay. That are still viable today. So if half the country is still working with their hands, why are we trying to put 100% of the country through college? It just, first off, mechanically, it doesn't make sense, because some people learn with their hands and not with their reading or listening or whatever.
Yeah.
And some people are just better off creating than they are trying to educate themselves on something that they may or may not use. So it is a strange dichotomy, but if the numbers play out, then a little under half of us should never go to college. Think about that when it comes to some of those horrible inefficiencies that they put out there.
Well, I think the financial education system does its best to try and help people figure out what they're supposed to do. But you were talking about this on a different podcast that I was listening to, and it was like, okay, well, what's wrong with these kids going out and building Minecraft communities versus, you know, learning about what they want? But it's their parents that are the ones who are seeing what they're actually good at and what they enjoy. And maybe they can encourage them to go and do a different career path or try something new. Like, I don't know, my nephew's in parkour. Like, he likes jumping off walls, and that's just something he's interested in. And then my niece is in gymnastics. My other niece is in swimming. My other niece's nephew's in like lacrosse and like really likes the sports side of things. But then I'm like, okay, well, how does he transition that into a career? Right. And then I'm like, okay, Jacob, what do you want to do when you grow up? And he's like, I want to be a conservation officer. And I'm like, that is so different. But at the same time, he loves nature. He loves being outside, you know, so it totally fits what he's excited with, right? So
right person, right chair. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's something that, you know, parents, I wrote an open letter to parents on my website, Alaina, and I said, I get it. I'm a parent. You birthed your child, you clothed your child, you fed your child, you sheltered your child, you raised your child, you educated them as much as you could. And somehow you think that the only way you can walk around this earth and say, I was a good parent, is if they have a degree on the wall. It's never been true in the history of our country. So again, parents being the traffic cops between children and life, okay, children and adults, they have to be really careful, because if you have 4 kids, there's a good chance that 2 of them shouldn't go to college. And I know that sounds crazy, but statistically that bears fruit. So all I'm saying is at least understand and allow your kids to go through different things like you were just mentioning, so that they can explore the possibilities. Because right now we have this herd mentality of grade school, high school, college. I mean, it's like follow the herd. And my opinion has always been, I would rather, if everyone is going that way, I'd want to go the other way, because if everyone's going that way, then that means they're leaving huge gaps of need on the other side. Simple supply and demand 101 from 9th grade, right?
Yeah.
Where supply is low and demand is high, that's where the money goes. So why wouldn't you want to do something that other people aren't doing? Okay. 25, please. Why wouldn't you want to do something that other people aren't doing? because that's where the demand is. That's where the acceptance is going to be. That's where your supply is low, and that's where the money goes. So at least something to consider.
Yeah, I love that. Well, and that's the thing in my industry, it blows my mind when you look at the statistics of like, A, how many financial advisors are needed in Canada, because I live in Canada. And then the average age of a financial advisor in Canada is 60 plus. And
Wow.
that's kind of terrifying when you
It
think
is.
about it, because all of those people have already built a business. They're already good, right? So they're not necessarily out there like pursuing new clients or trying to help people get to where they want to be. And then I look at this industry and I'm like, whoa, like we gotta fix that, because there's a big gap there where if we don't do something about it, if we don't encourage people to try something new, it's not going to be available. Like you're just going to have to go online and get financial advice versus sitting down and talking to someone who genuinely wants to see you win.
And that's a big thing. I don't want to forget this. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but so I keep things simple. So let's assume that you have 42 years of working life. 21 plus 42 is 63. Let's just throw that number out. And let's also assume that your money doubles every 7 years, right? That means you have 6 cycles of 7 years to double your money.
Yes.
Okay. So I also know that the very last double is the most important one, because that's the one that where you go from 600 to 1.2 million, okay, or whatever the number is. So why are we not teaching our kids that you can't blow off that first cycle, that first 7-year cycle, and not start saving until after you're 27 or 8 years old? Because if you do, you've lost the last double.
Yeah.
Have you not?
Mhm.
And so you blowing off that first 7-year cycle could cost you $500,000 on the backside. Why are we not teaching kids that?
Yes.
Because it's a simple fact. And I teach all of our people here that, I mean, we have a bunch of 401k millionaires here that are 20 years old.
Wow.
Why? Because I offered to pay them $50,000 a year. And I tell them, now I want you to thank me for me paying you $47,000 a year. Well, what do you mean, Ken? Well, that first 3,000, you never had it. You never saw it. You're not used to spending it. It's never been in your hands. So we're going to actually make believe that you only make 47,000. That first 3,000 is going into your 401k so that I can add a quarter to it every week and you can watch the thing grow. Why aren't we not teaching kids that? Because if you want to stop dependency in this world, start kids saving when they're 21 years old. It's the easiest, simplest, dumbest thing in the world. Why are we not teaching that? Because most people start when they're 35, 40, 45, and they've missed 3 of those double cycles. I mean, it's just, again, it's just me, but that seems like we want to talk about adding financial advisors. There should be financial advisors in high school to teach these kids some of these things.
I'm working on it. I'm getting in there. I volunteer with Junior Achievements.
Good. You get in there.
Yeah, I'm doing what I can to. So I just moved to Port Alberni, BC. And so I'm just networking with the teachers and trying to get myself into the high schools and even the middle schools. Like, man, some of those kids are eager. Like they're super eager. They're like, I delivered newspapers. They're so excited to have $20 or $50 or whatever it is. I told my niece and nephew that they can split like our bubbly cans, our bottles, they can take that and they can then learn to invest it. And it's like, okay, well then now you have $100. What are you going to do with it? So my nieces and nephews know that they don't get birthday presents or Christmas presents from Auntie Alaina. They get experiences. They get money. They get an opportunity to save and an opportunity to have a conversation with me about what they're saving for. And it's just creating a different mentality for them where they know that they can create wealth and they can build it because they're not going out and spending it on silly things like candy. It's like, oh, well, I have this $5. Well, Auntie's going to ask me what I'm saving for when she goes to visit, right? And so I've just taught them. I have what I call the 5X rule. And the 5X rule is it worth 5 times as much to you? Because that's what it's going to be in the future. Like you're talking about those doubling periods. So are those $50 shoes worth $250?
Right.
Probably not. Right. So then you check yourself. And for myself, it was my Starbucks addiction. As you can tell, this is a 25-year-old mug. But when I worked at Starbucks, I got very heavily addicted to coffee. And anyways, I was spending $300 to $500 a month at Starbucks without even knowing. I wasn't even looking at where that money was going. I was like, why am I broke all the time? Right.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I'm being very wasteful in how I'm spending my money and I need to
Sure.
check myself. So you learn through other people's hardships or your own. But I think it's really important to teach children. I'm really passionate about teaching kids about money.
Well, that's one of the things, and it's one of the reasons why I built this course, because even though it's more of an adult course, meaning there's some concepts in there that, some financial concepts in there, I teach it to junior achievement kids and boys and girls clubs. And,
I
you
love
know,
it. Me too.
I found that, they're a lot more with it than you think they are once they decide to listen to you, which takes a few times. But if you just put these ideas out there, people tend to look at me sometimes and go, well, wow, that seems rather simple. And I look back and I said, well, if it is so simple, then how come you're not doing it?
Mhm. Oh,
Okay.
I wish I could say that to some of my customers.
Yeah.
They're like, why am I broke? I'm like, because you don't save money. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, but it's the thing. I mean, the course is doing really well. I just finished version 2.0, and it's great because it's literally 45 minutes per session. It's 8 sessions. And it kind of teaches you that, in a simple way, Alaina, it's really hard to build the puzzle without the box. Okay. You can have all the pieces all over the table, but if you don't have the box staring back at you, it's hard to put that puzzle together. You might be able to do it, if you spend a lot of time by yourself for years, but if you have that thing to guide you, it constantly inspires you to continue to do more and do more and to put those pieces of your life together. And that's what this course is all about. And, it's something that I built as a way of giving back. When you become an entrepreneur and you become a successful one, the one thing you always want to do is to look back behind you and say, now, how can I shorten the learning curve for someone behind me to come up and do that for themselves? So I built this course. I donate most of the money from it to charities anyway. And it's a course that's $179. I've seen courses for $3,000. It's none of that. It's not about that. It's about me giving back. And that's what the whole book is about. You get a book and you get the course and you take it. And I absolutely guarantee you that once you're done with this course, it will change the way you feel about yourself and the way you see your life going forward. So I encourage people to give it a try and let me know what they think about it.
yeah, I would highly recommend it as well, because when you have that picture and you're like, okay, this is where we're going, it
Mhm.
gives you that opportunity to really create that momentum for yourself to go, okay, now I've got the picture next, right? What's my next step? So for myself, it was defining what my core values were and going through how I'm going to create that in my life, like creating forward thinkers in my family and going the extra mile and really focusing on inspiring people through educating them. And when I first saw how compound interest works at 22 years old, I'm sitting there
Yeah.
going, what the heck? How did I
Yeah.
not learn this stuff in school?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And just learning, okay, I could save when I'm 20, $150 and I'm good for retirement. Whereas if I wait 10 years, then I need to now save $400 a month. And if I wait 10 years after that, I have to save $1,000 a month. And I'm like,
Right.
huh? Like, why don't people know that stuff? And it's
Right.
just so frustrating.
It really is amazing. I mean, for a country, especially in the United States, for a country that is always so worried about running out of Social Security, the best fix for Social Security is to not need it in the first place. Okay.
Mhm.
So, you're talking about making a penance for what you put in. You work so hard for your whole life and you might get a couple $1,000s a month or whatever that might be. But just imagine if you had forgotten about that $60 a week that you were putting away as a kid, and now all of a sudden you have a couple $1 million in there at the end. And that's making you way more money than Social Security would have ever made you. It really is the best fix for Social Security or any like those types of programs is just making smarter people of ourselves. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah. Well, one of my mentors talks about how just creating a life of excellence is the ultimate rebellion.
Oh, for
And
sure.
And it's just like when you are at the stage in your life where you don't need the help of the government, you are free, right?
100%.
And I was so grateful. I'll tell you, it's been 4 years since the beginning of COVID. And when COVID hit, I was not worried because I knew that I had created freedom for myself. I worked for myself. I literally worked from home at that point instead of going to my office. It made it easier for me because now it's all virtual. And I'm like, now I can work in Alberta, in BC. I can expand to the United States. I can, like work all over the world instead of being stuck in one place because the world was forced to change. And
Right.
it
100%
just,
correct.
it really just opened things up for us, especially in the industry I'm in, because we don't have to worry about like social security and stuff like that. I'm like, I already make more than what I would qualify for. And it's really frustrating for the fact that I paid into it for so many years as an employee. And then when future children come along, I'm like, I can't even claim that. I'm like, I don't even get maternity leave or anything like that because I make too much money and they'll just take it back anyways. And I'm like,
For
that's
sure.
a
Yeah.
broken system. Anyways, so I digress. I fired up when I talk about the government and that kind of stuff. So I won't dig too much into that. But anyways, I want to finish up on talking about your new book that is coming soon and what that's going to look like for you, what you're excited about, and what's next for Ken Rusk.
Well, first off, so the Blue Collar Cash was written towards the end user, someone who was thinking about their future, thinking about what they want their life to look like, how to design it, how to clear their mind and their emotions so that they could allow these spontaneous ideas to come in, these creative ideas to come into their minds. And so that book was written from that person, okay? Whether you were 15 or 50, you could read that as an individual seeking what you wanted up from the world. I've been noticing a lot because culture is everything in hiring and retaining people. And I've been seeing a lot about, when you run a company full of ditch diggers, I've had to worry about culture for 30 years.
Yeah.
I couldn't just put an ad in the paper and people would, fly into my building. So a lot of companies now are waking up to like, wait, what? We have to do this culture thing now? Like, what? Oh, is that why people aren't showing up anymore? And it's a whole different kind of game. So I decided to write this book. It's going to be called Cool Boss. And really, it's how to become a cool boss, how to find a cool boss, or how to change your current boss into a cool boss. And what it is it's really talking about really simple plug and play ideas as to how you can take the culture that you have in a company and really just fire it up so that people are ready to rock and roll and do the things that you need to help drive your company, because you can't do it by yourself and you can't do it by the old ways either. The old guard of, me boss and you employee, pounding your chest and, I can fix everything. I can do everything. I can direct everything. I can create everything. I can change everything. I can motivate everybody. That doesn't work anymore. People are different now. Loyalties are different now. What people want out of a job is different now. So the next book is going to talk about if you're looking to either be a boss, find a boss, or change the one that you have. These are the simple ways that you can go about doing it to build amazing culture within your organization. So
Amazing. Oh, I can't wait. Do you know when it's going to be launched yet? Do you have those?
yeah, we're writing it now. I mean, we're 4 chapters in, so I'm probably the end of the year, I'm guessing, but that's how slow books go. But yeah, it's going to be good. We're excited about it.
I hear that. My first book took me 3 years to write.
Yeah.
I just kept editing it and then I'd read it over and be like, what
Right.
message was I trying to get across here, And
Right. Oh
it's
yeah,
just,
I remember that clear as day.
oh man, and Friday and Tuesday and every other day I'm like, oh, it's getting dark out.
Right.
It's funny. But yeah, putting your passion on paper is really clearly your desire. And I think that a big part that I'd like to finish on is just focusing on the contribution side of things. And you've talked about that a lot. But when it comes to creating an impact and creating the life of your dreams, what can someone do to kind of just like piece that together?
Well, I think the first thing is to see clearly what it is. I mean, there's no doubt. And I actually tell people to use crayons in their cardboard because I want them to go back to their childhood. I want them to go back to the time where they had no job, no stress. All they had to do was create a rocket or a horse or a sunshine or whatever it might be. And I want them to open that box of crayons and I want them to smell the colors just like they did when they were probably 4 or 5 years old. And then just literally put this out on paper, get help from your family, see it really clearly for what it is. Because there's an interesting study, and I'll end with this for you. Virginia Tech did a study that said they took 100 people, they put them in a room. They said, raise your hand if you have crystal clear goals. Only 20 people raised their hand out of that room, which I thought was terrible to begin with. And they pressed them. I mean, crystal clear goals. Yes, okay. Not just hopes, dreams, or wishes, right? So then they dismissed the 80 and they said, okay, of the 20 people left, how many of you have written those goals down? And 4 people raised their hand. So 16 go away, the 4 were left. Now, how many of you have those goals out somewhere where you can see them every day? 1 person. Okay. Now, it's free to do this. It requires no training to do this. You don't have to go read anything or buy anything or whatever. You just need some crayons and a piece of card or poster board. But that they followed that 1 person, and over the next 10 years, they made 9 times more money than the other people in their lifetime.
Yes.
And yet only 1 out of 100 people is willing to go that far. And I'm saying, why is that? That seems so silly to me. It's because 99% of the people think their life is not in their control. And it is. It's 100% in your control. You just have to take that very first step, which again, I say is always the hardest one. But I want people to understand that you and only you know what your favorite things are in life. You and only you know what your perfect nirvana might be, your comfort, peace, and freedom. You and only you know what your favorite car, your house, your favorite vacation, your favorite sport, hobby, giveaway, whatever. Why are you giving that power over to so many other people, whether it's society or those in the know? Why are you not taking control of your own life and just sitting down and saying, this is what I want my life to look like? If I could live like this, that would be so cool. So that's the thing I would say is take it 1 step at a time, but put those things together, because it doesn't matter how long it takes you to hit a goal. My first goal, I bought a car 7 years from the time I wanted it. I went to Scotland to play golf 3 years from the date that I wanted to do that. So it doesn't matter how long it takes to get to the goal. What matters is you get to that goal, because then that turns you into this really confident, goal crushing, what's next type of person. And anticipating these things, again, I'll tell you, that's the only way to live. And I certainly hope everybody gives that a try.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for all of your advice. And honestly,
Welcome.
just building that confidence through those, okay, I did this, I did this, I did this. It is mind-boggling. Like, even just in my own adventure of the last 10 years of my life, you ask someone 10 years ago who I was, and they'd be like, she was shy. She didn't talk to anybody. She kind of just like kept to herself, but I was
Yeah.
a heavy equipment operator. I was good at just sitting there and doing what I was told. But then I found my passion, and I found what really makes me excited, like having a dog and not working 16-hour days, being
Yeah.
able to go and do yoga when I wanted to, being able to walk in the forest, being able to help other people understand their money. And it just gave me so much confidence, and it's made me into a person that I can be proud of. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say this, look at you now.
yeah, right.
Good for
Oh,
you.
it's so cool just to see how much you can change over such a short period of time. So I just hope that everyone takes some inspiration out of this episode, and make sure that you guys share the show. As you know, this is a holistically grown podcast, and we don't take advertising money from anybody, because I believe that it should be put out as a passion project. And we're doing what it takes to help people get access to people like Ken. So if you liked the show or got some value out of it, share it with someone, post it on your social media, make sure you talk about it with other people, and go get the book. And I do highly recommend doing the course, because it's a small investment in your future. And when you invest in yourself, you invest in the best version of yourself. And that's what Pursuit of Relentless is all about. So thanks again, Ken, for being on. I appreciate your time. And until
Yeah.
next time, that's Pursuit of Relentless signing out.